every day. One of the other, just to give you an example that's really small, for one of our clients, Las Vegas Tourism, they had a focus. They wanted to kind of own fantasy sports, and specifically with the PBR, which is the Professional Bull Riding Association. And they do their finales in Vegas. So they're trying to push people to go to Vegas for that event. And they wanted to surround themselves around the fantasy sports aspect of that. So we figured out, well, how can we make that bigger? So what we did is we had a sweepstakes where actually when you pick your fantasy team, if you win the sweepstakes, when you pick the rider, you're going to go to Vegas, and you pick a rider to be on your team, you pick him, he gets up, and he comes and he sits by you, next to you. You know, and you pick the bull, and they put a spotlight on the bull. So you're actually physically there, and the people on your team are coming up and they're on your team. So that was just a way to get creative with it. So it's things like that.
So my last company, before I moved to McCann, I worked on the launch of Chrome, which is Google's browser. And that stuff was really neat because they don't like doing traditional things. So we got like Scott McCloud to draw a comic and sent it to bloggers to explain why the technology was a different kind of infrastructure, which was cool because I love Scott McCloud. And we concepted this thing called Chrome Experiments, which is a website that lets you demonstrate the fact that having a really fast Java engine makes you be able to do cool stuff with browsers, because based on the very obvious insight that they built a browser for the future and no websites currently existed that could use what the browser could do. So we built these little games where you could I didn't build them, Google built them. We just said, it'd be really cool. You had loads of browsers and it was a film running through the different browser windows, like the animations frames, or you could throw balls from one browser to the other because the Java engine could deal with that. And I'm not a creative, so it was really exciting for me to say, could you just make one of those things? And they sent some geeks away to build it, and they came back and made it. And I was like, that's pretty awesome. I guess at McCann, one of the functions of scale is things move a lot more slowly. There's probably an exponential or disproportionate or inverse square relationship between scale and the amount of energy required to do anything. The stuff I'm most proud of, I guess, is we launched a suite of internal social tools because I work in a building of 2,000 people. And to me, that would be good if they all knew each other and shared ideas and stuff, but that's not how big companies work when there's no internal social spaces. So we built a bunch of open source tools so people inside the building could talk to each other and work out when to go for drinks, and maybe they would try and share ideas more, and then maybe cooler stuff would happen. So we got that made. The client stuff, we have some stuff in development that might be awesome, and lots of stuff that is not in development.
Please. Our social tools are actually, they put a cafeteria here when we moved into the building, so everybody sees each other during lunch.
That would be ideal.
That actually works surprisingly well too.
That would be fantastic, but we don't have any of those.
It actually did make a difference. I think in the last year, probably the thing that I'm proudest of is a site we launched called Delish, which is a food site. It launched as a top 5 food site in its first month. In a very competitive category. It's a partnership with MSN, so we are the food channel on MSN. So it's great, compared to some of the traditional magazine companies like Condé Nast, which had been running Epicurious for almost 15 years now. Our first month we were 3 times larger because we are the food channel on MSN. But the part that was cool, love scale, love revenue, all those sorts of things. The cool thing for me was MSN came to us for technology, because it's all of us. They do the ad sales, they give us the place, the channel status on the homepage, they do promotions from the homepage and Hotmail and other places about food, but then that is to content we create, and some of it came from the magazines, but the majority of it's original. But it's the technology that my team built, upstairs, that we control it, because Microsoft couldn't build as fast as we could. So for a company that really, in May of 2006, we did not have a single developer in this building, to launch, a couple years later, a top 10 food site with not a stitch of Microsoft tech in it. Microsoft went to an open source shop, no .NET in it at all, and said, okay, you can do
cover-
this.
cover the-
Yeah, don't quote that. Don't quote that. Delete that. Didn't realize that part was running because we never talk about that publicly. That there's not a line of .NET code anywhere.
Let's get this out there.
Because they said
He's tweeting it.
exactly because they said you guys can move faster. You know more about these subjects. We're going to outsource this to you. So I was really proud of the fact that this cool team of people who are far smarter than I am and our content people could come up with, here's a better food experience that we could launch. And since it's been up since October, it's been a top 10 food site every month. So that scale and the speed with which we did it, when we went to budgets in the fall of '07, Delish wasn't even in our plans. And in the fall of '08, it was a top 10 food site. That was my cool moment.
So, I mean, I love technology, so I want to tell you guys about something called Sense Networks, but I'll let you go and figure out what that is. The thing that was actually more interesting in the last 12 months was we worked with a woman who lost her dad to cancer and then is a cancer survivor herself and decided that she wanted to make beauty products for cancer survivors. What's interesting about it is she doesn't have a team. It's basically just her. And then we found some people to work around her doing about 20 hours a week. And what's amazing is we went through sort of, here's a checklist of things that you can do to get out there and start getting attention and basically be in a position that when you are starting to make your product line and you have to ultimately go and launch them, you have a huge community of people ready to help you do that. And you know, the checklist is stuff that you guys probably have heard of. So you know, how do you do SEO? Very basic stuff. If you're gonna, talk a little bit about it. But this is one person who didn't know anything coming in, and essentially we just coached her and said, here's SEO, here's how you can get on YouTube, here's what Twitter is, here's how you set up a Facebook page, here's how you go and find communities that you can interact with, here's some things you want to consider if you start responding to comments. Very, very simple stuff. And what's amazing is that within about 3 months, she went from nowhere, like not a clue what we were talking about, and you can keep that on record, to being someone who I would say, if you want to go and figure out some of the ways in which media has changed, you should go and talk to Britta, this woman from Cinco Vidas. And in a 3-month period, she has not spent any money on media. I'm sorry, but this is it's a startup. So I mean, I'm in the business of, I don't want you to spend money in ways you don't need to. But she's built a brand, and she's got to the point where when she goes to talk to manufacturers about her line of products, some of them have heard of her already. And that's very cool. So as much as I love all the technical stuff, what I love is that there's some very basic things that you can do to get out there, take a message, take something that you care about, and move it along quite quickly, actually.
What companies do you benchmark yourselves against, and where do you look for inspiration?
Anyone?
Chuck, you're making eye contact. You get to go first.
Honestly, it's one of those things. God, it's week by week. You see some new cool thing somewhere that somebody's come up with a cool idea for an interface, or I think right now some of the most interesting stuff is people playing with different ways of interacting with content, interacting with it visually as the topic, sorting in different ways, visual search. There are 1,000 companies out there doing something cool, most of whom will die painful little deaths, having contributed a
Yes.
great idea that somebody else will monetize. But yeah, I'm looking at, I can't even predict where it's going to be a link that somebody sent you. It's going to be something you read in the trades of these bleeding edge cool companies that start up and go away every week.
Maybe I'll name names, but I think the companies that are interesting to me are companies that set out with sort of a plan and then can admit that they're wrong and then change. And it's really, really hard. Like, I'm convinced that overwhelmingly most of the bankruptcies that you see now are very simply people that didn't figure out that they were doing something that was working and had stopped working. And that's an amazingly difficult thing to sort of wake up one day and just say, I got all the way here doing this thing that worked really, really well, and now it doesn't mean anything, and actually I'm back at the beginning learning again. So it's kind of like the chutes and ladders thing, except some people don't know they were supposed to go back.